Hello to all you vacation rental pioneers out there. My name's Matt Landau, and this is Unlocked. And if you listen to the podcast regularly, you could tell by my intonation on that little introduction sentence that this is not a normal Unlocked episode. This is not a tactical episode. This is not an icon interview. This is a third format of interview that I am experimenting with, and we call it the kitchen counter format. It's basically me here with my computer, my Rode microphone at my kitchen counter, talking to myself for your listening pleasure. And each of these episodes aims to discuss one main current event or topic. Last time we discussed the Keystone Awards, the first ever awards that VRMB decided to give to property management software solutions out there. The one before that was a summary of the GSV roll-up, which is a company called Greater Sum Ventures, acquiring different property management softwares with the intention to roll them up and sell them. And today we are talking about Vacasa purchasing Wyndham Vacation Homes. And I woke up this morning about 5:30 or so, and I reached over as I normally do, and I grabbed my iPhone. And I can already tell some of you are going to email me and tell me that I should not be sleeping next to my iPhone, that I should leave it in the other room. And that's probably true, Mom. However, this morning, I grabbed my iPhone, opened up my email, and there was like 15 or 20 emails from VRMB subscribers saying, "Have you seen this? Vacasa has purchased Wyndham Vacation Homes." And of course, I hadn't seen it yet because I was sleeping. I don't know what you people are doing up earlier than 5:30. And I thought it would be worth breaking it down a bit and exploring what to make of this news, and also sharing some of the other perspectives that I came across in the following hours of this morning, of this big news, so that you can make your own sort of educated and contextual opinions out of this news. To be very upfront, I tend not to follow the acquisition game so much. It's just not a territory that makes me super excited, something that I'm really all that interested in. But I do recognize that it has important implications throughout our vacation rental industry. And so I'm trying to stay a little bit more attuned to all of that. And Vacasa is a company that's been around for, I feel like 10 years now, and has been sort of acquiring property managers around the world pretty regularly. So this shouldn't come as like crazy out of the blue news to most people. Vacasa, I think before this announcement, had something like 12 or 13,000 properties under their management. And if I'm not mistaken, I think this acquisition would double the amount of properties, bringing them to 20-some thousand properties, which is just incredible. I managed 8 properties and lost all of my hair, much less 20-some thousand. What do we make of this news? I think there's probably a category of good that we make of this, good things that can come out of this. There's probably a category of bad things. And then there's probably things that fall into the I don't know bucket. But let's start with good. First and foremost, I think Vacasa will be offering to the wide world of travelers more consistent, standardized vacation rental properties, at least however they define and standardize these properties, than has ever been available before. And we talk a lot about vacation rentals making their way into the mainstream travel public. And if you have ever taken a vacation rental trip, you will know very well that unless it's someone that you're friends with or someone that you have been referred to by another professional, it's kind of a crapshoot, to be honest. And yes, Airbnb has their rankings, and yes, there are ways to go about finding the right property. But if you're just an average individual looking to try out a vacation rental for the first time, there's a fair degree of chance that it will suck. And in that sense, having all of these properties under one roof, under the guidance of one team, is going to close that gap for the better. I think that's probably a fact, even if it's a small amount. I think what's also good to come of this is that vacation rentals are in the news. They're just this kind of acquisition of a company like Wyndham, which a lot of people are familiar with. Most people are not familiar with Vacasa outside of the vacation rental industry. So the mere awareness factor, I think, is a good that can come of this. That's also probably not a bad segue into the bad. The kind of news that has been emerging of acquisitions and huge rounds of fundraising could also be perceived as a bad thing in the vacation rental industry, perhaps attracting people for the wrong reasons, perhaps making all kinds of headlines is not the thing that we need right now. That's a potential way of looking at this. Another bad product of this news would be probably for local property managers and owners. There's now going to be a significantly bigger, richer, more omnipresent competitor in your area. And whether that means you're now bidding a higher price per click on your paid advertising or competing on new levels and having to work harder to secure properties. That's bad for a local property manager, indeed. There's a couple things that I would say fall into the I don't know whether they're good or bad bucket. One is the fact that Wyndham couldn't figure it out for whatever reason. I'm not sure whether that's good or bad, but I would assume that if Wyndham was kicking butt with this vacation rental business, they would not be looking to offload it. The other I don't know is there's surely going to be more acquisitions and roll-ups of this size and probably even greater as time goes by. So that's an I don't know. Maybe this is just the start. Maybe we should just get used to this. There's most certainly going to be more venture capital rolling into the industry when these kinds of headlines are being made. People are starting to notice our little movement, our cottage industry. And that's an I don't know. I think it's a good thing, but it also could be perceived as a bad thing. One of the things that sort of stands out to me is that this news is not unlike a lot of kinds of news that's been coming out over the course of the last several years. These big acquisitions, these huge fundraising rounds, the industry's growing, all these things are changing. And something that's worth sharing is that I have the opportunity to travel around and meet a lot of owners and managers of all shapes and sizes. I have owners that I meet who have one property. I have managers that I meet that have thousands. And something cool comes from meeting all of these people in a relatively short period of time. Trends become very apparent. Patterns become extremely clear just because the conversation only happened yesterday and here I am hearing it again. And the big pattern that I've noticed is that when these kinds of news headlines come out, people typically fall into one of two buckets in the reactions. And the one bucket is, I'm freaking out. And the other bucket is, I'm not really that concerned. This is just another piece of information. I'm going to continue about my way. And here's how those two schools of professional look like, the commonalities that they all have to me from a third-party, unbiased perspective. The people who are less concerned are almost always smaller businesses. They typically have less than 100 or 75 properties. Most of them are of the limited edition nature. This is a theory that we've developed within the inner circle, which is basically the idea of channeling your personality, your individuality, and doing things that don't scale. And these are the businesses that tend to view this kind of news as just, rolling right off their back. The people who aren't so concerned typically have a really strong marketing portfolio and or a strong independent brand. They're generating a lot of their bookings off repeats, referrals, and direct website bookings. A lot of them just love what they do. They love their guests, they love their colleagues, they love their employees, they love their homeowners. They just really love it. It's a lifestyle business for them. And a lot of these people, and I have to say this, no offense to the Vacasa folks, a lot of the people who would not be concerned about this kind of news typically they kind of laugh at some of the things Vacasa does, specifically in their local markets. They sort of laugh it off as if like that's just a totally different kind of product than what I am offering. And I view that as a kind of confidence. But they recognize that there is a spectrum of property management done professionally. And they realize that they're really good at what they do. And for these folks, hearing this kind of news is really just encouragement to continue on their path, to continue doing more of what they've been doing that's been making them successful, that continue building up those repeat and referral bookings so they don't even have to compete with that cost per click. And those folks, again, tend to not really be freaked out by this kind of announcement. But then there are, of course, the folks who freak out, and I love them to death. If my mother was a vacation rental professional, she would be one who was freaking out. Typically, the profile of these folks who freak out, typically they're running more commodity-style property management businesses. They're less limited edition. So they're doing kind of the basics. They're not heavy on the personality. They're not heavy on the personalization or the unique touches. Rather, they were looking to scale. And in all fairness, they're sensing that a bigger, richer competitor who can scale better than them has come to town. And for them, in all fairness, the value proposition of their business is increasingly compromised the more that this kind of thing happens. These folks typically will admit that they've seen it coming. We've seen this coming, wave after wave of these sorts of things. So they're not disconnected from reality. They're fully aware of it. I think they have just yet to fully come to grips and to make a decision within their business one way or another. And I'm going to get to the kinds of decisions that can be made in just a moment. But in general, these folks are the kind who are saying that the industry is way harder than it used to be. They're frustrated. They're annoyed. They're upset that their energy and their time and all this effort that they have put into building their business is now not the same kind of return or reward as it used to be. And just in general, for those folks, my big focal point is that they just remember that the vacation rental industry is really, despite the distance that has come and the growth we've experienced over the past 10 or 20 years, it's really just getting started. And it is not too late to shift and to begin making some changes now that can position themselves to ride this wave. And it's worth saying up front that I think I am biased here as well. I used to run a vacation rental business in Panama, Los Cuatro Tulipanes, and I sold it several years ago. And so for that reason, I don't have the same threat to my business model that I do now with VRMB, which is an educational platform which doesn't really have that much to lose from a piece of news like this coming out, at least not nearly as much as my property placement or positioning would have. And I think that's a fair argument, but I am aware of that bias. And that is, I think, worth sharing is enough. I came across an article from my good friend Andrew McConnell on LinkedIn, and I'll link to this article below. But I thought Andrew addressed this news in a way that only he can. And he kind of lays out the announcement, and he suggests along the lines of what I was kind of feeling, that there's two potential routes you can take here. One route is to head for the exit. And Andrew actually argues that this could be a good time for those owners and managers looking to exit the industry because it's not the same as it used to be and they don't enjoy it anymore. He argues that with this kind of news, competitors for Vacasa are going to be increasingly antsy about acquiring management fleets. And for that reason, now's maybe a good time to get out. It's a peak moment. The other option is for those who want to compete. And I think that's most of the people listening to this podcast, most of the people that I interact with, quite simply because you love the industry and you are not willing to let a little bad positioning or a little adversity stop you from building your own lifestyle business on your own terms. One of the things I loved about Andrew's ready to compete category was this quote. He said, "No matter how much money you raise, you cannot know and address the intricacies of each location nearly as well as the individual who lives, eats, and breathes in that market every single day of his or her life. No amount of money can buy this," which is very well put. There is a certain level of proximity that all local owners and managers have over any venture capital or gigantic corporation looking to compete on an international scale. That is something that you have inherently, and that it's worth looking inwards and focusing on all those things. There was another article I came across, which I think was on VRMIntel. It was. But it was a guest post from my friend Jeremiah Gall of Breezeway. And if I didn't say the name of his company, Andrew McConnell and rented.com are awesome. I want to make sure I give my proper shout outs there. Moving on to Jeremiah and Breezeway. Jeremiah was one of the co-founders of FlipKey. So he has a unique sort of inside perspective on how this industry ebbs and flows. And the main theme of his article was that this kind of thing, and keep in mind that the Wyndham news was not, the Vacasa thing was not even out at this point. His main theme was that this is not new. He said, believe it or not, consolidation's not a novel theme. If we turn the clock back 20 years, we'll find similar stories. Resort Quest acquired dozens of managers, and it pushed to build a publicly traded multi-destination brand before it eventually sold to Gaylord. I don't know who that is or what that is. Then Leucadia, and then to Wyndham. He says, Instant Software folded together their multiple technology platforms to create the industry's largest software provider before selling that to HomeAway. Speaking of HomeAway, it went on a buying spree, acquiring the top listing sites to create the largest vacation rental marketplace. I'm going to link to Jeremiah's article below as well. But basically, his point is that this is not a huge surprise, nor is this kind of thing catastrophic or unsurvivable. Jeremiah said shifting dynamics will continue and two core disciplines of the business will further evolve. And then he goes into talk about these disciplines. I would highly recommend reading both of those articles just to give you an understanding of where this kind of announcement and probably more of them fit in our industry. But in reading those two articles and seeing all kinds of emails coming in from friends and colleagues, doing a little social media browsing over coffee this morning, I've kind of come to this conclusion that the news about Vacasa is both good and bad, but it is out of your control. Knowing what's in your control and what is out of your control is, I think, the first step in deciding what you are going to do next. I believe that things which are in our control, the things we have within us, are worth focusing on. And it was just this morning, after all of that, that I came across a post on the inner circle of a vacation rental manager named John Klein. And I thought it was very ironic, almost coincidental, that John posted this thread last night or this morning, just before the Wyndham announcement came. John said he was very excited because his business, a vacation rental property in Manasota Key, which had been open since 2015, had just crossed the threshold that his ratio of direct bookings, people who are booking through his website, through repeats and referrals, that the ratio of direct bookings to online travel agency or third-party bookings was greater. He said that the curve of direct bookings had officially tipped, had officially crossed his third-party booking channel curve, and that he was very excited because that represented a lot of hard work in building his own website, nurturing repeat guests, and that he was kind of off on his own now. He was building a business that he could more or less control. It was not easy by any means, but it was his independent mojo that to me was as exciting and impressive as was the announcement about Vacasa. And if you really think about it, there's only one ultimate stakeholder, and that is the big majority shareholder of Vacasa. And there is really only one big stakeholder in Minnesota Key and in that business, and that's John. And in both of these instances, they have created outcomes where they are in a better position to achieve their goal. And that is the beauty of the vacation rental industry, my friends. That is what makes John's announcement equally cool and satisfying and fulfilling than Vacasa's announcement. It reminds me that all of these independent stakeholders in our industry are equally important as the biggest announcements and acquisitions that we have. I'm reminded, I read a book 2 years ago that I've been referencing ever since. It's called Anti-Fragile: Things That Gain from Disorder. It's by an author called Nassim Taleb. I would highly recommend it to anybody who likes these kinds of books. But his main argument is that there is no antonym, no word exactly opposite from fragile. And that is why he creates this term anti-fragile. But his argument is that the things that can take threats, the things that can survive shifts and corrections, those are the things that are comprised of lots of independent parts. Those are the things that are inherently fractured and fragmented and disorderly. Those are the most sustainable kinds of ecosystems. He says the worst possible case is one in which a winner takes all, that everybody's outcome depends on one individual or one transaction. And he oftentimes uses the analogy of the restaurant industry. He says the restaurant industry will never have a crisis in the way that banks have crises. He says the restaurant industry is composed of independent, small units that do not threaten the system. He said that randomness is really the magic of it all. It's distributed, it's not concentrated, and therefore everybody can win. That is such a great description of the vacation rental industry in my eyes, an industry that is growing by the day. If you look back 10 years ago, I don't think anyone would have predicted where we are today. And the most exciting part is that we barely have begun. The most exciting and dynamic days are still ahead of us. So I would like to encourage you, no matter what your take is on the Vacasa acquiring Wyndham Vacation Home news this morning, that you celebrate these kinds of announcements and growths in our industry the exact same way you are celebrating the smaller wins, the independent businesses that are deliberately and methodically growing, the John Kleins of the world, the vacation rental professionals that are building their businesses on their own terms and that are focused not necessarily on huge scale or going public, but on creating magic.